Hello, welcome back to Inside the Birds with Geoff Mosher and Adam Caplan. And of course, we're finishing off our NFC East preview series. We are doing that with the Philadelphia Eagles. And of course, we bring in our godfather of tape breakdown, Greg Cosell, to break down this Eagles team. Greg, I don't know if you know this. They actually won the Super Bowl last year. It was a really big blowout over the Chiefs. Yeah, you know, you're in a cave. I don't know if the tape got to you yet, but the but guess what? That roster that won the Super Bowl very convincingly over the Chiefs, a lot of it is back this year. Now, offensively, defensively, not a lot of it is back.
They've got some questions for sure.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about. But we do want to start offensively because, you know, the Eagles have so many players that people are pretty familiar with their game and what they do. But the major changes on offense, Greg, are really in two backup spots that are going to be important now. One is backup quarterback. Tanner McKee is going to be the number 2 quarterback. So we wanted to start by asking you this. What do you remember about Tanner McKee coming out of Stanford, right? And then what stuck out from his tape last year when he did play for the Eagles?
Well, I think the reason McKee was a 6th-round pick is simply because he lacks movement ability, but he was incredibly refined in understanding how to play the quarterback position. I remember watching him at Stanford, and he just was, quarterback, we get so caught up in the guys that can run around that, sometimes you lose sight of that it's a really disciplined craft position with so many subtleties and details and nuances. And McKee was that guy. He showed that in college. And I thought when he played last year, he showed the same thing. Now, he's not going to break away and make plays outside of structure. Can you run boot action with him? Sure, you can do that with any quarterback. But he is really, given his size and given the fact that he's not really athletic relative to a lot of other quarterbacks, he's a pure pocket player. But he is in some ways, I don't want to use the word mastered because that's too strong a word, but he's for the most part really has an excellent feel for the nuances and details of the position and how to play it from the pocket.
So when he got in that game last year, now obviously it was Kellen Moore's offense, and you saw him put some points on the board. What stuck out there besides just being able to operate the pocket? Was there anything about his poise or his
oh yeah, you can see the poise. I mean, quarterbacks are different, and now because you have quarterbacks that make plays in multiple ways, it's hard to say that this is better, this is worse. But McKee plays efficiently from the pocket. He drops back, he hits his back foot, he knows where to go with the football, and the ball comes out. Now, some might say, well, that's old school quarterbacking. You can't play in the NFL like that, all the time. Well, it's funny. I've been, in the offseason, I tend to talk to coaches, and offensive coaches in the league, while they clearly appreciate the fact that guys who can make plays outside of structure, that's become important, they still talk about the fact, and these are coaches now. I believe this too, but these are coaches that I'm talking to, offensive coaches that still say that when you get into those sort of critical high leverage moments, 3rd and 4th quarter, 3rd and 9, must have plays that you've got to be able to drop back, read a coverage, go through a progression and deliver the football. And again, I'm not saying McKee is at the highest level, but that's the style of quarterback that he is.
Right.
And, don't forget, he's been doing that probably since he first picked up a football. That's, the guys who are like that, from the time they picked up a football, they're always thinking about who can I get the ball to, not can I run around.
Right.
The guys who are great athletes, they know when they're 12, 13, 14, they're the best athlete on the field, and they know they can just take off and go, and no one's going to catch them, and no one's going to tackle them. Right. The Tanner McKee types, they're always thinking, well, who can I get the ball to? Because I'm not going to run around.
Right.
Geoff, let me add this. One thing about McKee, which he's really improved on, I saw it in 23 in training camp where I was like, man, he doesn't move very well. And then I was at training camp, their off-season program last year. I was like, wow, is this the same guy? Because he's over 6'6".
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He showed better pocket mobility, which had to happen. He had to be able to move better. Mm-hmm. We saw it in the preseason. And it's funny because as I travel, and I know Geoff, you know this because you talk to people and you travel. He's like a phenomenon in the scouting world. Everybody knows about him.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny because it was only a 6th-round pick, but Geoff, in a league that has trouble developing quarterbacks, this is a guy to watch out for the future. It's really interesting. He's come a long way. As Jordan Mailata calls him, the Mormon missile. This kid's arm, you have to see it live. Like at OTAs, it's something else. He's 6'6" and a quarter, I think, and 230. And Geoff, you see this kid throw the football, you go, wow. So there's a lot there.
Right. I think what it shows is a validation, a little bit of an Eagles process that not everybody agrees with. Some people think that your backup quarterback should be somewhat relatively similar to your starting quarterback so that you don't have to change your offense. And I'm not saying that that's a bad way of thinking too. You don't want to have to change up a whole lot on the fly if you have a quarterback who can run. However, if you're choosing a backup quarterback who overall is far more deficient than a potential starter or a much better backup who doesn't have the same traits as your starter, then you're basically passing on a better talent just to quote unquote fit an offense. And you don't even know if this guy's ever going to play. The point is get the best player, get the best quarterback. And if he's not an exact clone of your starter, that's okay. You'll figure it out because that's what coaches are paid to do.
Right.
So really interesting. And, history says that McKee may have to play 1, 2, hopefully not more, but the backup has had to play for the Eagles for quite a bit throughout the years. So the other spot, Greg, that we wanted to really talk about is this running back position, because Saquon Barkley stayed healthy last year. And when he's healthy, he's one of the best. He had a great year, an unbelievable year, the centerpiece of the offense. But there's no more Kenneth Gainwell, who was sort of a teacher's pet and did a lot of the little things right. And now you've kind of got Will Shipley in year 2 versus A.J. Dillon as a free agent versus, a couple of guys that they brought in. So how about Shipley? What can we say about Shipley in his limited action last year? Did he show you that you think with some improvements he can be a Kenneth Gainwell type?
I believe that. I love Shipley coming out. He's just not big, so he's not a feature back in the league. But I think he's a really good receiver. I think he's got good traits. I mean, I thought Will Shipley was a good prospect. I wasn't surprised as to where he was drafted because he's not going to be seen as a feature back. He's not going to be seen as special. So he's clearly a number 2 back, a complementary piece. But I think he can certainly fill that role.
Yeah, that's the issue, Geoff, is if let's say we'll move this forward, if Shipley is the 2, it's what happens if he has to play. Because you just don't know about the volume. That's the one issue that I have. Whereas you've got Dillon. Now, if Dillon's healthy, if his legs are back, he didn't play last year. If he's healthy, we know why he was brought in here to handle rushing volume. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I would think, guys, that if Barkley were to have to miss a game or 2, we hope not. But I would expect that Dillon would fill that role. I don't think that Shipley would fill that role, but I could be dead wrong.
I would think if Dillon made the team, first of all, he's got to make the team. He's got to be healthy, right? And not sort of become another Rashad Penny like situation.
Right, and that's it's funny you say that because you never know about undrafted free agents. And I'm going to mention a guy, and he could be cut, tomorrow. Who knows? Right. But I liked Montreal Johnson's tape coming out of the University of Florida.
Good. We were going to ask you about him.
And he's, to me, he's in some ways like Shipley. I mean, I think he's good runner, good receiver, good football player. I actually talked to Graham Mertz, who was the Florida quarterback at the Combine, and he loved Montreal Johnson. Now, again, Graham Mertz is not an NFL, scout or coach, but I mean, Montreal Johnson is one of those guys. He's not, you always hear with backs, well, he's not special. And of course, he was a free agent. So that tells you something right there. But I just thought he was one of those guys that's a good football player. And I hate to be cliched, but I thought he did everything well. And I think there's a place for him in the league. It may not be with the Eagles, or maybe it is. You raise a great point, Geoff. There's no guarantee that A.J. Dillon makes the team.
Geoff, see 2017 with Corey Clement. On the point, you know what? And they had a lot of backs on the roster.
Yeah.
So, Greg's point is well taken. And by the way, he ran well, 4.41 for a guy of his size. He's almost 215.
Yeah, I actually think that is pretty special to run a 4.4 at 215. He just didn't have the production, right? He had to get a knee knee injury and
knee issue. Right. But man, he's healthy, and this is a guy to watch out.
Good back.
Yeah, okay. That was definitely one of our dark horse guys, Greg, that Adam and I mentioned when they signed him. Offensive line looks good. So obviously Tyler Steen will battle it out with Kenyon Green. Have you been surprised at all? I mean, I know Kenyon Green dealt with a shoulder injury and set him back a little bit, but I believe it was you who mentioned to us that you didn't think the tape was great even before. This guy was not considered overdrafted. He was considered the best interior offensive lineman when they picked him.
His tape has not been very good in the NFL. That I can tell you. But he was a consensus. You're right, Geoff. He was a consensus guy. It wasn't as if Houston, when they drafted him, it was people said, "Oh my God, what are they doing?"
Right.
But his NFL tape has not been very good. It'll be interesting. I mean, Tyler Steen has been up and down in his opportunities up to this point, but now theoretically he's the guy. We'll see how it plays out. We'll find out. I mean, that's the only position of concern. I tell you, they drafted 2 offensive tackles who are obviously, not going to play this year, barring anything crazy happening. But I was truly fascinated by the tape of Miles Hinton. Truly fascinated, because that guy has every trait you want in an offensive tackle. Now he's a 1-year player. He had gotten benched at Michigan the year prior. So, that factors into what, team doing their due diligence and find out what the deal is. But boy, and I know that the Eagles love him as far as what the traits are. And we know about Jeff Stoutland and what he does with O-linemen. Now, obviously we don't know how much longer Lane Johnson's going to play. I mean, Lane Johnson's reaching the point where you have to start discussing him as one of the greatest right tackles to ever play the game. I mean, he's at that level of play. I mean, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer type player. So who knows how much longer? How old is Lane Johnson?
35, I think.
5. I believe he's 35.
Yeah. Now, again, that's up to him. And, assuming his level of play doesn't deteriorate. It certainly didn't deteriorate last year. So, I mean, we're dealing with kind of a freakish guy.
Absolutely. So let's talk about offensively, because the Eagles have talked about evolving a little bit. Greg, can this team finish? I think they were 26th or 27th in passing, and top 3 rushing. Obviously, they ran the ball as well as anybody. Do you expect that gap to be bridged a little bit this year for them to have repetitive success?
Essentially, what you're asking, Geoff, is are they going to play the same way, or is the new OC Kevin Petullo going to look to put his stamp on it and expand some things? That's essentially what you're asking.
Yes, but not because he wants to put his stamp. Do they have to? Will they have to adjust because the league is now seen what they've done last year, just like in 2023?
Yeah, but I think again. There's no way we can answer that like it's a mathematical equation, like, oh yeah, this is definitely going to happen, or this is definitely not going to happen. We don't know that. But don't forget, Jalen Hurts has been playing quarterback now for a number of years. The league has seen Jalen Hurts.
Right.
And, the Eagles offense, when you had added Barkley into the equation, I mean, even go back to 2 years ago when they were in the 3 years ago, I guess it is now, when they were in the Super Bowl and lost, and Miles Sanders, he's not Saquon Barkley, but he had a really good season. They ran the ball really, really well. Can we sit here and say that Kevin Petullo may not want to add some things to the pass game? Maybe he will. But I think philosophically, I don't think you're going to see a dramatic change in how they play, because I don't think they can make a dramatic change in how they play. Jalen Hurts is one of those quarterbacks that has really defined strengths and a couple of limitations that everybody knows that are not likely to change at this point in his career. That would be my guess, that he's not going to be a different guy this year. I mean, it's pretty remarkable that in the NFC Championship game and in the Super Bowl, other than checkdowns and the long touchdown to Devonta Smith, which came off a turnover and was just a great call and a great throw, and a great route by Smith, but a great ball by Hurts. But other than that, he did not throw one ball between the numbers. Okay,
that's crazy.
Which is crazy in the NFL. Now, think about that for a minute. That's by design. They don't throw the ball hardly ever between the numbers, because that's not the way Hurts sees the game.
Right.
But on the other hand, because he's in the gun on almost every play, the Hurts run game element is such a critical piece of their offense. And I will add this, and I mentioned this somewhere else weeks and weeks ago, and not that I'm starting to see a lot more people talking about it, but we talked about it during the season. I think the thing that's and more teams are doing it, by the way, but I think the Eagles have kind of been in the forefront of this. I think one of the things that separates the Eagles and changes the way defenses have to play them on third down is the fact that they're a 4-down offense. So when they get to their 40-yard line, the minus 40, if it's 4th and 4 or less, you can almost take it to the bank that they're going to go for it. So that changes how you have to play on third down. Because if it's 3rd and 9 and you give up a 7-yard gain and, everybody on defense does this, it's 4th down, the Eagles are going for it. So now think about what that means. Teams don't want to play man against the Eagles because of Jalen Hurts and his ability to run. But if you play zone, rally up and tackle, and it's 4th and 2, they're going for it. So now you have to change a lot of your thinking as to how you play against the Eagles on third down. And I think that is such an important part of who they are on offense. And Hurts is a major part of the fact that they can go for it on 4th and 3 or 4th and 2. Let's put the tush push aside. We know when it's 4th and 1, that's what they're going to do. But I'm talking about 4th and 2, 4th and 3, 4th and 4. They go for it, and Hurts is a critical factor there because of his movement ability.
Right.
Greg, one more guy that I want to talk about before we move to defense, and using your term, there's something there. Terrace Marshall was a 2nd-round pick, and Eagles don't have great depth at receiver.
Yeah.
It comes into play if somebody gets hurt, then it's Dotson, and then who the heck would be the 3? So Terrace Marshall is a 2nd-rounder. I know he's barely done anything, but what do you remember about his tape?
I like him coming out of LSU.
Ahead,
He could play inside, could play outside. He's had moments in the league. I got to tell you, look, I don't know about Jahan Dotson. None of us do. He wasn't a big factor in the past game. There's 2 guys that I think are interesting to see as we go through, training camp.
Sure.
And that's Marshall and Aeneas Smith.
Smith. Okay.
And, I liked Aeneas Smith a lot coming out too. So we'll see. I mean, obviously, look, this is not an expansive pass game. I mean, it's really the focus is Brown and Devonta Smith and, Goddard. Adam, you know this better than I. Goddard, would love to be somewhere else where he can catch 90 balls because he's got that kind of talent. But, I mean, this offense is not a big volume offense in terms of the pass. I mean, look, the Eagles were the best team in the league last year. I don't think anybody can dispute. Besides winning the Super Bowl, they were the best team in the league.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of games where they dominated the game, and Hurts was, 15 for 21. They're not a team that throws it 40 times. Rarely does that happen. And so therefore there's not a lot of target share for 3-4 guys. It doesn't happen that way. So, the fact that Dotson wasn't a big factor, while we could talk about Dotson individually and say, oh, he's not this, he's not that. That's not what their offense is. Right. So is that going to change? I don't think we know the answer to that. I really don't. I don't know what Kevin Petula is going to do. Every offensive new guy does something that's a little different. Is he dramatically going to change? I mean, they're not going to become the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow throwing the ball 40 times. But
not with Barkley there. But also understand, Geoff, we'll be sending back to you. This is Petula's 5th year with Hurts. He knows the strength and the limitations. So he's going to call the game the way that Jalen needs to call it, and he's going to take Jalen's input. So I think it's a good thing that they didn't go outside the organization and promoted Petula, because, again, he knows, and not just Hurts, he knows the talent of the receivers, Goddard, as you mentioned. He knows what he's dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah, you stay inside with him. You go a little bit outside for fresh ideas by bringing in a new quarterbacks coach, and maybe that's a good mix for the room.
Go ahead. Scott Loeffler is the new quarterback coach, and this just popped into my head. And I'm not saying we have no idea, but Scott Loeffler was at Virginia Tech when the quarterback was Logan Thomas, and Logan Thomas had a really great season under Loeffler. And I actually thought Logan Thomas had a chance to play quarterback in the league. The league thought differently. That's the way it goes, but Thomas had a really good season under Loeffler, and I guarantee he'll have some concepts that they'll talk about. What they decide to implement, we have no idea. But would surprise me greatly if they varied. Wouldn't it surprise you guys if they varied greatly from what they are?
Oh, they're going to run it. I mean, with Barkley, by the way, real quick, Geoff, with Leffler, we'll move to defense. So in 2015, it was either going to be Leffler or Kevin O'Connell to be the Browns quarterbacks coach.
What year was this?
2015. It was Leffler or Kevin O'Connell. 2015. Right. John DeFilippo was the OC, and the decision was to go with Kevin O'Connell. Hey, worked out for Kevin.
Yeah, well. It did. All right, let's move over to Eagles. The defense, Greg. Obviously, a lot of missing pieces, a lot of turnover for the number 1 ranked defense last year. Let's start up front like we always do. Milton Williams, I always joke that we were going to turn our show Inside the Tape into Inside Milton Williams' tape, because week after week after week, you just started to see him dominate. I have to imagine playing alongside Jalen Carter, that's a big part of it. You get a lot of one-on-one. So now Moro Ojomo will step into that spot. They did draft a kid, Ty Robinson. They have some other guys as well, but it'll look like to be Moro Ojomo at first. How do you feel like that transition from Milton to Moro will go? What are Moro's?
Well, Ojomo has showed flashes when he's played.
Yeah.
Now, again, none of us can sit here and say he's going to be Milton Williams. We certainly don't know that.
Right.
Ty Robinson is a really interesting player. His tape was really good. And I bet they're reshaping his body a bit, because he looked, on tape, he looked like he was a heavy guy, and I guarantee they're reshaping his body. But he's Ty Robinson, to me, is one of those guys that we could be talking about. Maybe not this year in terms of how many snaps he plays, but I think he's a really good prospect. And I think he's not as good a pass rusher as, let's say, someone like Braden Fisk, but he's that kind of plays hard, makes plays. He's going to play somewhere along the line. He's going to get snaps. And I'm really curious to see him, because I thought his tape was really kind of fun to watch. But getting back to Ojomo, I remember when he came out of Texas, I really liked him, and I was truly surprised as to where he was drafted. Truly surprised, because I thought he was worthy. To me, I thought he was a third-round type player. I really did. I loved his tape. I thought he could play the run. I thought he could rush the quarterback. I thought he's got quickness to him. He could be one of those guys that ends up being really good. We don't know that. It's mid-June, but I really like Moro Ojomo.
Nice. And if it winds up being a little bit more Ojomo / Ty Robinson mixed in, that could be a good thing. It's a little depth for the Eagles as well.
I guess Jordan Davis is still the elephant in the room, because he has up to this point in his career, he has not played on third down or in obvious pure pass situations. I'm assuming it would be the same. I'm assuming, now Davis has had every game. He has moments, he makes a couple of plays that you go, wow, but that's what he is.
Right.
Didn't you tell us one snap of nickel last year? Did you tell us that he had one?
I think he played one snap of on third, not one snap of nickel, one snap on third down.
Oh, third down.
Yeah. Third and
third down,
third and medium.
Plus. Yeah. Obviously, if it's 3rd and 1, one snap of third down and 6+, if memory serves me correctly.
So Geoff, on Ty Robinson, what I was told by someone in scouting for a team, that on Ty Robinson, the knock on him was, what is he at this level? Okay, we know he's an interior defensive lineman, but what is he a better fit for 43, 34? How do you use him? Is he a 7 technique? You just that was sort of a tweener, a friend of mine said. So, okay, but the thing about Ty Robinson is everyone at scouting likes the player. Because he's effort's great.
Yep.
Good interior quickness.
Yep.
But there's something that was missing to not make him be a third-round pick.
I talked to Matt Rule, who was at the Combine. He's the Nebraska coach.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And he said the kid is all football. He's just one of those crazy football kids that he loves it to the point where it's obsessive. He's going to make it. We just don't know in this first year. We don't know that, but he's going to work his way somewhere along the line to get snaps. Adam's point is a good one. Because he's not a pure pass rusher. You don't look at him and say, "Oh man, he's a 3 technique. Just send it."
Exactly.
But he's strong. He's powerful. He's going to find a way somewhere along the line to get snaps.
Right. Greg, the edges, it's fascinating, right? There's no more Josh Sweat, who played such a huge role for this team. No more Brandon Graham, who, it speaks for itself. And maybe the youngest, as far as experience-wise, set of edges in the starting edge in the history of the franchise, because between Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt, you have 11 NFL starts. Both guys have, I would say, high ceilings. I know you've talked about them both. People keep asking us, which player has the highest ceiling? Is it Nolan Smith or is it Jalix Hunt? And I struggle with this one. And I think Jalix Hunt, just from what we saw last year of how fast he developed for a guy who was just a safety in the Ivy League 3 years ago, it almost makes me think the sky's the limit for the kid. But what did you observe?
Yeah, and I thought he played well when he played. Obviously Nolan Smith made a major jump from early in the season and, through training camp, where you guys talked about it a lot, that he just didn't look very good. In the preseason, he looked awful. And then, he started to kind of use his hands and he started to become a factor. But Jalix Hunt is a little bit of a freakish athlete. I'm really curious to see what he does this year. I think he could be a really good player in multiple ways, because I think he can rush the quarterback with his safety background. He can drop into coverage. But, I thought the Eagles did a nice job with 2 signings. Now, again, when you sign guys who have had some success, but it just injuries hasn't worked, you don't know. But I thought that Azeez Ojulari, okay, now this kid, he can rush the quarterback. And we'll see. Because, we don't know for sure about Hunt yet. I mean, now you're asking Hunt to play 50, 60 snaps a game, or at least 40, and, hasn't really done that. And then Josh Uche is another guy. It was a couple of years ago. I remember when New England was still good, I remember doing pieces where, he was involved in their pass rush schemes. So, you don't know with those guys, but they were both pretty high picks. And I remember doing Ojulari coming out of Georgia, and he was a really good prospect. I remember he's not tall, but he had really long arms.
Yep.
He knew how to use that arm length, and he was a good pass rusher. Now, injuries obviously have impacted his career, but, when you sign those kinds of guys, you hope one of them really works out. If 2 of them work out, it's beautiful, but you hope at least one of them works out, makes your roster, and can play meaningful snaps.
Greg, before we get to the secondary, one player that I wanted to bring up, just because we want to see how this works out. Campbell, we know, has come back from surgery, right? But
Jahad Campbell, yeah.
Right. And we know they're going to start him as an inside backer, but we also know he's been an edge rusher. So as an edge rusher, from what you saw from Alabama, was he very impactful? Because he also, as you know, played. Give us an idea of what it looked like.
Campbell is a freakish athlete. He's not a purely physical player. I think that's the area he needs to improve. Maybe it's one reason why he dropped, because he's really not a physical player. But this guy's a freakish athlete. He's a local kid, Timber Creek High School in South Jersey, so he came home. But he went to Alabama as a pass rusher, as an edge player, but they had Dallas Turner and Will Anderson, so they moved him to stacked backer. That's how it all played out. But he went there as an edge player. So he can rush the quarterback, and he's good at it. He's bendy, he's flexible, he's an athlete. That's his game. So, as a stacked backer, because he doesn't have experience, stacking and shedding, to use that term they use for linebackers, that's not his game per se, but he's a really, really good athlete. Just as an aside, I was talking to a coach who basically said, number one, he couldn't believe the transition Zach Bond made, and he came right at and said Zach Bond was the best inside linebacker in football this year, which is a strong statement given the Fred Warners, but that's what this coach said. So, and we'll see about Nakobe Dean if he's ready week 1.
He won't be.
And if he's not ready week 1, is it Jahad Campbell? Is it Jeremiah Trotter Jr.? I mean, then who's going to, who plays next to Bond?
Right. It's interesting because with Campbell, you have this great athlete, right? With Trotter, not necessarily the athlete, but somebody who knows how to play. Sure, so they have an interesting dichotomy there.
Greg, one guy I want to talk to you about is Powell Ryland.
The Virginia Tech kid.
He put up monster numbers, right? He put up monster numbers. And I was talking to a friend of mine. He did what's called the crossover tape. He didn't have his area, but he was assigned the edge rush group for the draft. He goes, you know what? He's not what you would call explosive. Good effort. He put up major sack numbers, but he goes, you know what? He asked me, what did you hear about him? I'm like, well, put up big numbers, but didn't really play to his numbers. He wasn't that guy. what did you see from the tape? Because the numbers, the sack numbers are
the
crazy.
reason he's a 6th round pick is you nailed one of the things. Number one, he's smaller, and number two, he's not explosive. So you look at the traits and you go, nah, they're just okay.
Right.
But sometimes we talk about a quarterback and say, hey, he just sees the field.
Yeah.
Well, this guy just knows how to rush the quarterback. I know that sounds cliched, but this guy just has a feel. And by the way, people talk about that at all positions. Guys
pretty good, though.
that actually have a feel for how to rush the quarterback. And he had a feel for how to rush the quarterback. He just knew how to use his hands, knew how to set up offensive tackles. He just knows how to rush. But then, because Virginia Tech is, I guess, in the ACC, and he's not necessarily playing against the best competition because he's not purely explosive. He's not twitchy or sudden. And because he's shorter than you like, Adam, there's a lot of people, that just figured, okay, well, this guy's not going to do that in the NFL.
One thing before we move to the secondary, which is interesting, because if you look at it, Greg, for the future, right, for 26 and beyond, so we know that barring something unforeseen, it's going to be Smith and Hunt this season. Ojulari's on a 1-year deal. Uche's on a 1-year deal. So for the future, and they got a couple other guys like KJ Henry and O'Shawn Mathis, but the reality is if Powell Ryland makes a team, which he should, Howie has a history of keeping his draft picks, who knows? He could, Geoff, Powell Ryland, not this year, but down the line, Powell Ryland could wind up being the third guy if it all works out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the experience there, right, that he showed in college, and you throw a dart in the late rounds, day 3, and you hope that a guy who has some pass rush traits, gives you some and learns behind some really good ones as well.
Yeah. And you also sign guys like KJ Henry, who again, free agent, might not make the team, but he came out of Clemson, played big time college ball. He's 6'4", he's long. I mean, I did him coming out, and I thought he had a chance to play in the league, So, sometimes that works out, Sometimes, hey, he could be cut tomorrow. But, I mean, that's what you do. You bring in guys, because what happens with guys like that, you guys know this, okay? What happens with guys like that is someone in the scouting department liked him, and they go back and they look at their reports and they say, you know what, we had a 3rd round grade on this. And I'm saying they did or didn't, but I'm just giving an example. Oh, we had a 3rd round grade on this guy. Let's bring him in. That's the way that stuff works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's move to the back end of this defense, Greg. And corner's an important position, but we want to start
somewhat,
safety. But safety in Vic Fangio's defense, you've talked a lot about the different
really important
responsibilities. Very important. and they drafted a kid out of Texas, and Drew Makuba, as he likes to know. Yeah. And you can almost see the smile on Vic Fangio's face, and you can only imagine what Sidney Brown was thinking when that happened. But how would you describe the fit for Drew Makuba in what Vic Fangio does with his safeties?
Perfect. I love Makuba.
In one word, huh?
Yeah. Now, again, I don't know if he's ready. I mean, that's a whole different question. But Makuba was drafted to start next to Blankenship. Now, whether that happens week 1, none of us can answer that. But that's why he was drafted. You don't draft a safety number 2 like that, and to be a special teams player. He was drafted to start next to Blankenship, and he's got 4 years of college experience. He was a starter from day 1 at Clemson, played there 3 years, transferred to Texas. This kid, I hate to use the word, but it's true. This kid has instincts. He has a great feel for what he sees. He sees it. He reacts fast. He was light at the combine, but I know they've added 10 pounds already. So hopefully they get him up to about 200, which is fine. But this kid he's an explosive athlete. He can play on the back end. He plays downhill in the run game with conviction. He will hit you. He doesn't lay you out. It's not like Ronnie Lott, but he will come down and hit you. This kid's just a really good football player. Really good football player. Sees it, triggers, gets it, can play on the back end, can play downhill. He's a perfect quarter safety. Barring anything unforeseen, assuming I can't imagine that he's a kid who can't pick things up just because he played 40 years in college and he played like he understood. So, again, we're not there, but I would imagine sooner than later, this kid's going to start next to Blankenship.
And you told us also when he's at Clemson, he played some nickel, correct?
Yes, he's played nickel as well. So, hey, look, assuming when he's ready, they might have some interchangeableness. That's not a word, but you know what I mean.
Optionality, we'll call it.
Yeah, yes, with him and DeJean. So now you get into a whole different because DeJean has a lot of. I mean, he's a really smart, savvy player, and he can do a lot of things. So now you have some optionality. There you go. I like that. You have you have that as well.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, Greg, down the road, maybe even a few games into the year, when some of these rookies get their feet wet, you can sort of see Vic Fangio's influence and what he can do when you have a player like Campbell, right, who can line up at sort of Louvu-ish. He can line up an inside linebacker, but he can come down on the line and rush the passer. He can drop. He can look like he's rushing and drop. He can look like he's dropping and rush. So we're playing the ILB and rush. And then you've got Cooper DeJean, who can rush from the nickel. He can drop. He can go outside. He can, as you just mentioned, switch to safety on a dime. And maybe you bring Makuba in the nickel. So that is the stuff that Vic Fangio, who does not blitz a whole lot, loves, because he's going to keep the quarterback guessing just on usage of his personnel.
And as far as you guys know, because you may know this, because I don't, I've been actually just sitting in my office grinding away, watching a lot of tape, which is kind of what I do all the time. But my guess is they're probably cross-training DeJean at safety as well. Are they not?
A little bit, yeah. That's going to happen. Yeah, Vic said that, yes.
Yeah, so I mean,
for base,
DeJean is just a super smart player, although Makubu played that way in college as well. Again, I can't sit here and compare their smarts, but Makuba played like a really intelligent football player.
Right. They've also used in the portions of the media that we're able to watch camp, they've used Cooper at outside corner in base defense as well. And Vic said that they're basically trying him everywhere.
That wouldn't surprise me, because now, opposite Mitchell, that's an open spot. That's a competition spot right now.
Right.
Speaking of, so there's probably the most we get asked about any player on the back end is Keely Ringo, who's now in year 3, and the Eagles really felt that this should be his year to start, but they've always liked, particularly Howie Roseman or Dory Jackson. Greg, this is we know it's going to be a competition in training camp. Ringo, his 3rd year, we know he's limited tape, but you also saw him in college. What are your thoughts on Ringo versus Jackson here?
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't played a ton in the NFL, so there's not a lot of tape to study. Ringo coming out, to me, he's straight line fast, but he's stiff, and he struggles to stop. So now I don't know if he's different. I mean, they know this too. I can tell you that from talking to people in the building. So I don't know if he's different now than he was, 3 years ago, or if that's just his body type and that's what he is.
Yeah.
I mean, guys like that tend to be better in press. Now, the Eagles are not a heavy press team. So, when you play off coverage and guys are stiff, you start getting into the transition, the change of direction, the ability to stop when guys attack them vertically with their stem. That's where he's had issues coming out of Georgia. Like I said, he hasn't played enough for me to say whether he's different or not. That may just be the way his body is.
Mm-hmm.
Geoff, training camp last year, and the competition was over pretty quickly. Rodgers beat him out after Ringo had a very good offseason, but once they got to training camp, that showed up. The transition, and then you would see the back of his jersey, and it was just clear. Rodgers was much better, but if you look at the traits, 6'1 3/4, elite speed, right?
Length. He can run fast in a straight line. He's a very linear athlete.
Yeah, he is long. He's very long for a corner.
Yeah,
but man, he's just his ability, the lack of transition.
He's very stiff in his core and his hips. That's the problem.
And we were flat out told by more than once by scouting people, you really can't get rid of it. I've asked so many people.
Yeah. Well, he was one of those guys because he played at Georgia, because he was the #1 corner coming out of high school in the country. When I did him coming out, I did not love his college tape. And I remember just getting ripped a new one by so many people. Oh, what are you talking about? It's Keely Ringo. He's at Georgia, because don't forget, he was one of those guys that a lot of people had, before the process really got started. He's going to be a top 10 pick. And when I did him, I said, ooh, I think this guy to me, and I don't do lists like that, but I saw him as a lower round player, which of course is what happened, because he does have these limitations.
Mm. Greg, when you just look at the overall picture here on defense as we finish it off, I mean, they certainly have the bodies to replace losses, and the losses were big.
Right.
Whether they're high draft picks, they have some good veterans. This will probably end up being one of the, if not the youngest starting defense in the league, one of the youngest starting defenses in the league, and certainly from an experience standpoint. And that's what I see. I see a lot of real raw talent, and the potential to be really good again, but missing some key veteranness that you got with PG, CJ Gardner-Johnson. Yes. Nakobe was playing like one. He's probably going to be out till October. And so this will be a test, I think, for the players and the coaches of how quickly they can grow up and develop.
Yeah. And again, the questions we spoke about, who is the week 1 starter at safety opposite Blankenship? Who's the week 1 starter at left corner opposite Mitchell at right corner? Where does Cooper DeJean play in base? These are things we don't know the answer to yet, and they're questions. And the coaching staff they'll feel good about their answers, but we've all been around coaches enough to know that sometimes they'll tell you, well, we just don't know till we play the games.
Right.
And that's the way it is. You just don't know till you play the games. How quickly can Jihad Campbell understand Vic's defense to where they feel comfortable putting him out there? Yep. Because I got to tell you, linebacker in Vic's defense, and I've had this conversation with Fangio disciples, linebacker is so critical in Vic's defense. For years, people said, "Oh, linebackers lost. It's not as important a position anymore." Well, in Vic's defense, it's a really important position. There's so many examples of that with plays. We're not going to go over those now, but I mean, so how quickly can he acclimate and assimilate into the defense?
Right.
They were thrilled, as we know. They really wanted Campbell, and they didn't expect him to drop, and they were trying to trade up to get him because they did not anticipate him dropping. So this is a player they wanted. So. They wanted him for a reason. They wanted him not to play all on special teams this year. They wanted him to play meaningful snaps. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah. And of course, I forgot to mention Slay in there. When you lose Slay, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, and Milton Williams, that's a lot of combination of talent and experience. So that's what
players who played in big games and played well.
Ton of it. Right. That's what this Eagles defense will have to. That's the challenge that is in front of them in the 2025 season. That is about as good. I mean, I don't know if anybody can go through the Eagles roster as well as we just did. That's going to finish off our NFC East preview series. We thank Greg Cosell again, does this every year. It's an awesome, awesome experience for us. So, Greg, we thank you. For Greg Cosell and Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. You've been watching the Inside the Birds NFC East preview.